Okay. Well, a lot has changed since I first started. Is this even working? Just making sure that it's up on YouTube before I go. There we go. All right, here we go. Well, as I was saying, since my last video podcast about February 21st, a lot has changed, although I would say uh, the writing was already on the wall back then for Iran, although we didn't talk about it. What I wanted to talk about for a little bit here is something that I have not seen very many people talk about. Actually, I haven't seen anyone talk about it, like from a philosophical point of view. It has been observed, of course, that uh, we began this conflict by wiping out the Ayatollah Khomeini and 40 of his closest friends. And, I think some people might wonder if there's some kind of a precedent to that. And so we should talk about it a little bit. I'm not going to, get too far into the weeds because there's going to be a lot more to say about it going into the future. But I think that I'm a little bit, before I get into it, my own personal views on this are conflicted, and it's because I mean, how do I put it? I mean, I think it's great that the Ayatollah's dead and gone. I mean, couldn't have happened to a better guy. Iran has been killing Americans for my just almost my entire life. And American presidents have done hardly anything about it. You could go back even to Reagan with the bombing in Beirut. I know a veteran from that time that it's still bitter about what happened to his friends there. He actually lost people um, in that, and resents the fact that he never got vengeance at the time. And it just goes on and on. Iraq became a nightmare in large part because of operatives from Iran, and of course Hezbollah and Hamas have killed quite a few people, and we know they're linked to Iran. In fact, I think it's safe to say let's. Oh yeah, they're not going to let me. I ended my subscription because I mean, hardly anyone sees my posts anyway. It's ridiculous. But I think that like 40 Americans died in the October 7th attack on Israel. So America wasn't immune even then. So I have no love lost for Iran. I'm glad that they're having the rough time that they're having. But on the other hand, having studied these things, they don't usually end as nicely as they begin. They tend to take on a life of their own, and I, like many people, am worried that this is going to escalate into something far more dramatic. But again, I'm conflicted because this is a problem that should have been dealt with decades ago. You could have argued that like I saw that there was a Trump clip going around from like 1981 or something where the young Trump was asked about Carter's handling of the hostages there, and the young Trump said we should go get them. We should get our troops. And I kind of agree with that. My general philosophy on um, the use of force in these kinds of situations is that very often the failure to use violence and force actually tends to create more violence later on. Uh, you ultimately have to have one man standing, one country standing at the end. Otherwise, things just sort of drag on and on and on and on. Just as an example of look at Germany and Japan. They tried to negotiate surrenders, and our leadership at that time said no, no, unconditional surrender. And we demolished and demoralized those two countries completely. And the result was that now they're basically allies. And then you look at, by way of contrast, North Korea. We sued for peace. We agreed on a peace, sorta, there. We have an armistice, and you still have people in prison in their own country there. And North Korea is still a thorn in our side to this day. So I guess you could say maybe MacArthur was onto something. If you know any history, you know what that might mean. But at any rate, so leaving the Iran thorn in our side all these years was a recipe for disaster, a recipe for conflict. It was inevitable, I think, that some incident would happen to precipitate an all-out attack, conflict between the two countries. Are the circumstances of this the way that one might imagine? Like, wasn't like Iran hit us like Osama bin Laden did with 9/11, right? That's pretty much straight up act of war. We'll come back around to that. I think that where I'm coming at it, where I would like to come at it, tonight is this question of, are we really going to make it our MO to take out the leaders of these countries, just straight up, um, as our first strike, so to speak. And we don't just have what happened to the Ayatollah Khomeini here. We have how Trump handled Maduro in Venezuela, and that was only like a couple weeks ago, right? That was like first week of January or something. So, I mean, that's pretty fresh. And there's lots of jokes on X about how the people in like Cuba and Canada and Minnesota need to be watching out here and be careful given Trump's track record on this. So when boy, so I hope I made it clear that I don't have any kind of love for Iran in this, but I don't think that position is incompatible with the concern that by taking this tactic, we are pretty much guaranteeing that in any kind of future conflict, the adversary, his first move is going to be against our leadership, right? Like, I think that has to be the realistic takeaway. I mean, go, rah rah Trump. You pulled out Maduro, you took Ayatollah. That's great. But on the other hand, a big target is now on Trump's head. I mean, there was already one, I suppose. but all of Congress too, right? They're all implicated. They all have big bullseyes on their backs because of this approach, and I think we have to wrestle with that reality honestly. And you could argue that um, that's exactly what Bin Laden was trying to do. He was by sending in 2 planes to the DC area. Uh, we know one, of course, with Pentagon. We'll leave all the conspiracy theories aside for the sake of this conversation. Um, Presumably, Flight 93 was on its way to the Capitol building or whatnot. I mean, Bush wasn't there, so they wouldn't have gotten the president. But there could have been other planes. That's something that's come out, so it could have been even more. But they definitely were trying to decapitate our economic system, our military system, and some layer of our government. That's kind of what my point was with that. Um, as a general tactic, even okay, let me put it this way. So I framed it as, okay, do we really want to have this precedent because now our leadership is going to be targeted? But really, I think the precedent has already been established, and we don't usually think about this. The media hardly talked about this, and you can't really trust the media either. But to our knowledge, there was one, maybe 2 attempts by Iranian operatives to take out Trump in the lead up to this last election, right? And I just did a little search, so you can repeat the search and dig into those if you haven't heard of them before. And I think it's fair to say that if that would have happened, that we would have considered that an act of war. So here's the question: does an assassination attempt have to succeed in order for it to be considered an act of war? Like, is it really important that Iran succeeds in killing Trump before the United States considers it an act of war? I don't think so. I think just trying, um, that counts. And if you go back in time a little bit, I remember Saddam Hussein tried to assassinate George Bush Sr., I believe. And people mocked George Bush Jr. for his Iraq motives because Saddam tried to kill his dad. In my I don't know why that you would mock that. I don't understand why you would dismiss that. To me, if you try to kill an American president, that should be the end of your country. Like, that should just have been kind of a no-brainer. But no, in the past and even now, there are people who, my grandpa would have called them candy asses. People who just sort of tiptoe around, the sugarcoat things. They try to be all nuanced or whatnot. That's not what my attitude would have been or would be. If you try to kill our leader, you're toast. If you take our embassy hostage, you're toast. We're not gonna negotiate beyond whatever seems pragmatic to get our folks out, but then you're still toast. I mean, you're gonna be toast. So, given the fact, as far as we understand it, that Iran did try to assassinate Trump, to what we believe, at least, that's the case. Yeah, that's That's a virtual declaration of war, in my opinion. So you could say that the precedent for killing the Ayatollah and all 40 of his closest friends was already set. But it's interesting. Um, I haven't studied this, but I have studied war, and in the course of the years, I know that the deliberate targeting of the leadership has um, permeated the development of war. So, just for example, during the American Civil War, uh, with the advent of rifles, boy, who were they? Were they the sharpshooters, or that was the Civil War? I think that's the Civil War. I think there was some riflemen. There was some newfangled rifles that allowed for the targeting of British leadership, and the Brits thought that was pretty unmanly. You just shouldn't do that kind of thing. But there was American units during the American Revolution that went out of their way to take out the leadership. And you have a situation in general where um, those who are in asymmetric warfare, the ones who are the more guerrilla warriors tend to think highly of such tactics. And that's the Americans led the way even then. It may have been the polite thing to do in Europe to let the leaders um, have a good time, say hello to each other, wave at each other during the battleground, but no, the Americans kind of put the kibosh on that, and I don't think they were the only ones by any means. Certainly, by the Civil War, we were taking out leaders. Certainly, by the time you got to World War II, I believe it was either in Save a Private Ryan or Band of Brothers, maybe both of them that kind of highlighted the don't salute the captain, because that'll make him a target for snipers. I think it may have been. I think there was a scene both in Save It Private Ryan and a scene in Band of Brothers where that happened, where um, an officer was targeted by a sniper. So not by any means something that does not belong in history. We know that in the Vietnam War, the Viet Cong and the NVA, they targeted our officers. I think but you could argue that this is different than heads of state. Of course, we went after Castro, didn't we? But yes, in general, um, going after a head of state, I would have to say, is something just a little bit different than what has commonly occurred before. But I don't necessarily think that that's like there's a certain kind of person, um, a liberal maybe, who talks about like diplomatic norms, and we've got all these civilized ways of doing things, and Trump and Republicans or conservatives or whatever, um, or the Teddy Roosevelts will say, they just have contempt for those norms, and it's those norms that hold us together, and that's just poppycock. That's like the kinds of things that children say, infants, really, like no concept of the real world. The real world is real politique. It's Sun Tzu. It's It's brutal. You can have norms, I guess, if you want, but in the end, nation rises up against nation. God uses nations to judge the nations. And that usually often historically has meant the destruction of the leaders. And if you want to um, radically uh, end the threat of the leader of the end the threat that a country poses to your country, then historically that has meant, you know, taking down the whole country, including the leadership. Um, Obviously, we saw that with Hitler. Um, Hirohito might be a slight exception. Um, but, we did drop 2 nukes on them. So there's that. My point is that nonetheless, well, I have many points. Okay. So one of the points would be that whether we like it or not, these kinds of decapitation events are precisely what are going to be most effective at reversing the tide of a battle, especially if you have people in charge who are fundamentally indispensable for that. So, like Ayatollah and his 40 closest friends, if we end up taking out 200-300 of the leadership, basically, what does Iran really have left to fight with in that case? I don't know. Well, let me just kind of leave it at that. So, like, it's effective as a tactic. So that means that tacticians are going to be looking at that. It would be on the table for anyone. Putin's thinking about it for Trump. She's thinking about it for Trump. Trump's thinking about it for Putin. Trump's thinking about it for Xi. These are the 3 people that I just mentioned are not candy asses. They're hard-nosed pragmatists. They're the kind of people that that understand how the world really is. They're not like these self-righteous, chest-thumping liberal progressives that think, oh yeah, if we just had better diplomacy or whatever. It's just they're the reason why so many people die. They just make me so angry. Really, they just disgust me. Actually, um, but I don't. I'm not trying to get off on that. The point is that as I said, I have lots of points. There are in a very large number of people in this world. They don't care about norms or anything like that. If they think that they can win a war by taking out the leader of a country, they will do it in a heartbeat without any moral qualms whatsoever. And it just so happens that for the first time in my lifetime, we have an American president that is just like those people. Um, it's kind of new. Like, I don't really know what to do about it. Um, and it's something to behold. That's for sure. But okay, having said that, going back to what I said earlier, this puts a target on the back of our leadership as well. And that's kind of what I want to talk about next here a little bit. And I'll get to that in a minute. But I don't know if you saw this, but after we killed the Ayatollah, then we killed the next guy within hours. Um Ayatollah Arafi. And then today, the Iranians met to vote for another person, and is Israel bombed them as well. So now they're all dead. Of course, Israel has already established their tactic with Hezbollah and Hamas, routinely finding out who the next leader is and having them whacked, because they're in a life and death struggle. They understand what it is. So this is a campaign that's going to continue. So you have to think that Xi in China and Putin, but I would say especially Xi. I don't think Putin wants anything to do with the conflict with America. I think China is counting on it. I think they are expecting it. And given the tactics that we've adopted, I think it's a no-brainer that China. I'm not going to even bring up Russia again. I don't see them going after America at all. I think China is not going to take any chances. They're going to go for a first strike. They are going to act preemptively. I think that she will be so convinced from how Trump handled Maduro and how they're handling the leadership succession process in Iran that that if they don't take Trump out, Trump's going to take him out. Like that, he's got to be thinking that, and so he will. I think it's just now it's absolutely in the cards, and there's not a lot of cards left in the table, and that causes me concern. Again, not not crying any tears for Iran, but would seem to suggest that there is a greater reality now that just hypothetically, for example, that Washington D.C. will get nuked, and it's some sort of a first strike kind of thing. Hey, look at Pearl Harbor, right? That was a first strike. That was preemptive. They should have gone after Roosevelt too, I suppose. And I think a lot of us wouldn't necessarily be too sad to see Washington D.C. get whacked, but I think most of us would say, that's not your job; it's our job. If we're gonna have a second American Civil War, to bring our tyrannical government to heel, that's for us to do. You guys stay out of it. I could be wrong, because I think that in any sober calculation about the capabilities of the United States, you have to take into account that the leadership structure, yes, currently right now, very heavy emphasis on the chief executive at the federal level. Certainly there is that, but we've got 50 state governors who all have control of their National Guards. Our National Guard units, many of them have actual combat experience because, whether you like it or not, they were deployed to active combat in lieu of our regular soldiers, in an unfortunate amount of numbers. But now those, that 45-year-old mechanic with the beer belly, he was kicking down doors in Fallujah. He knows what it's like. And there's a lot of guys like that. A lot of guys like that. Um, who can still be called up. Can still lend their expertise. And so, unless you take out the governor, and unless you take out, excuse me, take out the president, take out Congress. Good luck. Take out that line of succession, but the governors are going to hold everything together, so you're going to have to take them out too. But now you've got it so granular at that point, that with the way the United States is structured, that you could take out the governor and the vice governor, and it would not take very long for each state to pull together. I think pull together leadership and get right back into the fight, and just be hopping mad at that point. Just really, you wouldn't want to awaken that beast. And it's been a long. I think that any sober analysis of the capabilities of the United States too pretty much means that you're not going to invade. You're not going to put boots on the ground and as a regular army kind of thing. Many of the U.S. states field more armed men into the woods during hunting season than other countries have soldiers. I mean, it is a well-armed country. They know we know what we're doing. We know how to handle our weapons. I think that taking out our leadership is on the table, but I think the ultimate conclusion, if you see it all the way through, is it would only be delaying the inevitable. But that doesn't mean that they wouldn't try. So I'm very conflicted on it, on the way we've done it. I don't think there's any pure way to approach this situation. I don't want to get involved in a foreign war, but on the other hand, this is a foreign war we should have been involved in long time ago, back when I was a kid. We should have been dealing with this. It should have been dealt with decades ago, like many others. And was the pretext for our involvement this time solid and good? I don't know, but it doesn't matter, because we tried to kill our president, and you killed 30,000 of your own people who were protesting you. It just eventually had to come to an end. So where did I leave this? Let me wrap this up. Let me come to a conclusion. I think we have to conclude that Trump is not setting a precedent. The precedent was already well established throughout history. Kings and rulers have always gone in and killed the kings and rulers of other countries. It hasn't been really common of late, but certainly it is something that's been on the table for America included. For example, with Castro, just as one example. And how could we forget Noriega, right? So I think that here's okay. As I'm trying to resolve this into a coherent concern, is that I think that, for example, and very plausibly, Iran might view that their own survival depends on sowing chaos in the United States. Now, do they have the capability of doing that? That's the question. And there's long been concern that Iran has sleeper cells embedded in the United States, Hezbollah, if for decades since 9/11, since I've been watching this very carefully, that has been the concern. And we've had an immigration policy. Didn't matter who the president was, really. Even Trump, until the second term here, didn't really crush the illegal immigration thing to what was necessary. Anyone could have been coming through. Anyone probably did. It would be really eh, like a miracle, something that beggars belief, that out of those millions of people that came across the border, there's not a good 10, 20, 30, or 40,000 um, Chinamen or Hezbollah type people or whatever that are ready for action. And they might. So if the goal is to sow chaos, yeah, they're going to go after Trump. I if they have the ability, if they have the boots on the ground, I think they're going to do it. I think they have to do it. They just will not survive Trump. The integrity of the Iranian state will not survive Trump, and they've got to know that by now. So they're going to go after him. But I think that they will also try to, if they have the capability, kill a lot of Americans. They can't do it over there, so they're going to do it here. If they have the capability, they will. And taking out the Ayatollah could have been, the thing that has stayed their hand to this point. I don't know if you saw this. I just saw there was a video posted of allegedly a Iranian number station that has just started broadcasting. I don't know. That's a little unnerving, a little bit. So one of the maxims of the Philosopher King channel is we're on our own, and so you have to take care of your own defense. And whatever else you think about all these other things, you can agree with Trump, disagree. You can disagree with the war in Iran or whatever. That isn't going to change whether or not there's Iranian sleeper cells, and if they come crashing into the mall while you're shopping, and you say, "Oh, I didn't agree with Trump," that's not going to save you, you dumbass. Sorry, you're going to die. So, uh, you've you've got to be ready for these eventualities. Have contingency plans. Be ready to defend your own life and those of your family. If you have not already acquired the means to do so, sell your cloak and buy one. So I know this is a bit of a rambling episode tonight, partially just because I wanted everyone to know that I'm still here. I want to make more videos. But well, I don't really have a good excuse. I do have good excuses, but um, I'm it's not easy to make plans for every contingency. It's time consuming kind of thing, and not always a lot of time for making videos, and certainly not editing them. However, I think it is time for me to create a intro video. Excuse me, some intro music. Maybe um, a fun intro video as well. Now I'm just repeating myself. So if you happen to have watched this far, thank you for watching. I appreciate it. I do want to get more content out there. It's just a matter of doing it. We'll see how it goes. Keep your powder dry. Keep it ready. Thanks for watching. It's Philosopher King 2.0. I'm out.